Hello, welcome to another episode of This, That, and the Other. And what I'm going to talk about today is a memory from my childhood. We lived in Huntsville, Alabama on Monte Sano Mountain. My mother was taking myself and my little brother, who was very young at the time, to Monte Sano Baptist Church on the Monte Sano Mountain in Huntsville. And we probably went there for maybe a year and a half. Or our time there was brief, but I do remember us going there. Maybe starting 1966 or 67 into 19 maybe 68 or 69. I will have to take a look at that. Would have been 19 after sometime in 1968 when we lived on Monte Sano Mountain. I remember the pastor of the church, or whatever they call him in the Baptist church, Keith Weekly, came to our house and talked to my parents. I don't know if that's how we ended up starting to go to that church, or if we contacted him to come by and visit us. I have no idea how that happened, but I remember being really little, seeing that church the first time. Probably the first church I ever really, well, at least the first one I remember ever going to. I remember actually the first Sunday we went to that church, and I I was in Sunday school there, and I do remember teachers, Mrs. Watson and Belva Reed. Those were the teachers of the Sunday school class there, and the Keith Weekly was pastor. I think I already said that, but I remember some names. I had recently inquired about the history of that church, and I received a chronicle of the church from the current pastor, and I'm currently reading the history of it. I've gotten up to 1992, and it's great because I had asked for a listing of the history of the pastors the church has had over the years, and this chronicle definitely has that. And when the church was built, it first opened as the building first opened as a church in January 2nd of 1966. So when we started going there, that was a brand new church. I had not known that at the time, but I remember going to Sunday school there, and at the time I was going to what's called pre-K now. They called it nursery school back then. It was at Monte Sano Baptist, or I'm sorry, Monte Sano Methodist Church. They had the nursery school, and Mrs. Jane Barr was teaching that, and I've actually got in touch with her, reconnected with her, and she found out she was originally from New York, lived in Los Angeles for a long time. Her and her husband moved to Huntsville because he was a scientist and was part of the space team that moved to Huntsville in 1950. So kind of an interesting story. And I saw in what I've read so far that she's written some books on the history of Monte Sano, and her name has been referenced in what I've read so far on the history of Monte Sano Baptist Church. Another name that came up was the last name Hightower. I do remember Mrs. Hightower somehow connected with the church. I don't, maybe the Sunday schools. I can't remember for sure. I saw the name Cherry. I remember my mother telling me Mrs. Cherry was the one that played the organ at the church when we went. I did see them mention 1967 when gentleman, Dean Allen, and another gentleman, Bill Fetzer, both died of heart attacks within 4 days of one another in November of 1967. They were both were faithful members of the church. I do remember something about. I believe my mother said that Dean Allen was her the teacher of the adult Sunday school class. But anyway, I remember his wife after babysat my brother and I think she had two boys, and I remember her still babysitting us after her husband had died, and I I can imagine the how hard that was for her being a young mother, two children on her, raising two children as a single mom. I believe she did get remarried later on, but I I do I do remember that name. I saw that name was also mentioned. The church, from what I understand, went through a period where I guess maybe there was a decline in membership. And one of the things about Monte Sano Mountain was a lot of the people that lived on the mountain worked for the government, and people would get reassigned to other places. So that there's they had some turnover on members, lost members because of that. And I saw that Reverend Keith Weekly resigned as pastor on August 15, 1968. A couple of interim pastors took over, and then one of them was Bob and Couch. And we, at the time, before Pastor Weekly had left, started going to Southside Baptist Church, and Bob Couch was, I guess, the associate pastor at that church. I thought he was a main pastor when I was a kid. But anyway, he transferred to Monte Sano Methodist Monte Sano Baptist. I'm sorry, and remained there for about a year from what I was reading. But I've read on about been reading on about the church and different pastors that church has had. But anybody that has an interest in this, anybody that's lived in Huntsville, interested in the history of the churches, any history of the Baptist church, interested in history of that particular church that may have gone there, it's a good article. And the current pastor of Monte Sano Baptist Church sent me the email of this chronicle of the history of Monte Sano Baptist Church, and I'm still currently reading it, and it's very, very interesting, very informative. So I definitely encourage anybody that is interested in this to maybe contact that pastor and get that email to them. It's very, very interesting to read. I myself have enjoyed reading it. I lived in Huntsville from 1965 to 1971. Then we moved overseas to Okinawa. And 1976, we almost moved back to Huntsville, but ended up moving to Northern Virginia, which I've lived since 1976. My dad worked for the government, and we moved around some. We actually had a stint in St. Louis, Missouri area too, living there for a while. And that's basically what I've been able to find out on the history of this Monte Sano Baptist Church. It's Monte's definitely. I definitely recommend anybody that goes to Huntsville maybe to see the Rocket Center or other various reasons to definitely check out the mountain. The mountain is beautiful, and you that's they do that's where those two churches are, the Monte Sano Baptist and Monte Sano Methodist. They're on the same road. They're right down the street from each other, and those are the memories I have of this church. And I am still looking for more ideas on shows to do in the future. Like I said, I do obscure aspects of history, shows about preserving history, and I right now the shows are kind of few and far between because I've run out of things to discuss, but ideas do come to me every now and then, like this one has, and I've been taking on a project of filling out some family tree books that I have, and one of the things in that book was places we have worshipped, and I kind of got interested that way and wanting to know the history of this church. I've contacted the old Southside Baptist Church too about history of that one as well, and do not have not heard back from them. But I we went to Baptist churches when we lived in Huntsville. When we moved overseas, my dad has going to Lutheran church. I had actually gone to Grace Lutheran School in Huntsville, and my dad would take us to I think Wednesday night services or Thursday night services, whatever ever they were, and we ended up becoming members of the Lutheran Church. I was a Lutheran for many years, and I became Catholic in 2011. I'm a practicing Catholic now. Every Sunday churchgoer. So anyway, it's been quite an adventure through the learning about God, trying getting to know Him, and still a lot to learn. I'm also currently reading the Bible again. I read the whole thing back in early 2000s, and I'm reading it over. I've gotten all the way to the book of Job, and kind of just going over what I don't remember from reading before, and which is unfortunately quite a bit of stuff. But I'm reading it again, trying to go a little slower and absorb what I can absorb from it. And with that being said, like, subscribe, share. As always, thanks for watching.